All right, so this is the 2015 FRQ. Starts off, it says the United States economy is operating below full employment. So we know below full employment is just code for recession. In part A, they want us to draw our economy in a recession using the ADAS graph. Okay, we know that the ADAS graph in a recession is simply when the intersection of aggregate supply and aggregate demand is to the left of the LRS. The LRS represents our potential output at full employment. That's why it's an F there, YF, at full employment. And the intersection indicates, Y1 here, indicates where we actually are producing. To show a recession, it means that our actual level of unemployment, or excuse me, our actual level of real GDP is less than our potential level. So this is an indication of a recession. If it had been long-run equilibrium, that means that AS and AD would have intersected along the LRS. And then if we were in an inflationary period, the intersection of AS and AD would be somewhere over here. Part B says, assume that the Federal Reserve targets a new federal funds rate. Federal funds is the interest rate at which banks charge each other. So the Federal Reserve has the ability to influence this rate by lowering their own interest rates. So I want to try and lower these interest rates. So assume that the Federal Reserve targets a new federal funds rate to reach full employment. Should the Federal Reserve target a higher or lower federal funds rate? All right. So in order to get ourselves out of this recession, we can just simply take a look at that flow chart. And we know that lower interest rates will encourage people to borrow money and spend it. And when they borrow money and spend it, that will increase aggregate demand. And increasing aggregate demand because it's cheaper to borrow money and spending it, that will get us out of that recession and shift ED to the right over here. So one point is earned for saying that for the target lower federal funds rate. So by targeting that lower federal funds rate, they could increase the money supply. I'm guessing it's going to be an open market question. Let's see here. Given the Federal Reserve actions you identify in Part B, draw a correct level graph of the money market and show the effects on nominal interest rate. Oh, okay, it would have been buying bonds, lowering the discount rate or lowering the reserve requirement here to help lower that interest rate. And they wanted to draw this here. So you know that the Federal Reserve, or monetary policy, I should say, monetary policy conducted by the Federal Reserve moves your money supply line, or the supply money, that's going to shift it to the right so that we can see a lower nominal interest rate. Those lower interest rates, targeting that lower rate, will spur more consumption spending and investment spending. So you got 2 points, 1 point for drawing the graph, and another point for shifting the money supply line to the right, lowering your nominal interest rates. All right, part D. All right, the policymakers pursue a fiscal policy rather than a monetary policy in part B. Okay. Assume that the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8 and the value of the recessionary gap is 300 billion. Okay, so this is going to be that math formula where change in GDP is equal to your change in spending times 1 over MPS. So if we know that the MPC is 0.8, that means your MPS has to be 0.2. And then 1 over 0.2 is going to be that, your consumption multiplier. 1 over 0.2 is going to be 5. It's going to be 5. So we're trying to change the recessionary gap. We're trying to change or move our GDP by 300 billion. So we have 300 billion equals some sort of level of spending times our multiplier that we just figured out was 5. So 300 equals blank times 5. All right. So we see 300 simply divided by 5 is going to get us that 60 billion. Excuse me. 60 billion will be how much we need to change spending by. In this case, it's going to be our government spending, how much we need to change government spending by. Next part here, it says, If the government changes taxes without changing government spending to eliminate the recessionary gap, will the minimum required change in taxes be greater than? Yes. Smaller than or equal to the minimum required change in government spending. And part D, you want to explain. Remember, when the government spends its money, it spends all of it. Government spending has a greater impact on GDP. Taxes have a smaller impact on GDP. Taxes have a smaller impact, and why they have a smaller impact is because when you get a tax break, people will actually save a portion of those taxes. They don't go out and spend it all. If you were to get a $60 tax break, you're not going to go ahead and spend all $60 of it. You're going to spend, maybe $50 of it, and you'll take $10 and put it into your savings account. And that savings is considered to be a leakage. There's more leakages with tax breaks. So tax cuts are going to be less effective at changing GDP. Their tax cuts are going to be less effective at getting the economy out of a recession than an increase in government spending. So because of that, you'd have to cut taxes by a larger amount to get the same result of that $300 billion. Yeah, it's going to be something greater than that. You have to change taxes by a larger amount. All right, let's move on. Assume the government lowers income tax rates to eliminate the recessionary gap. Okay, will each of the following increase, decrease, or remain the same? Aggregate demand explained. So if you lower people's taxes, they have more money. They're going to increase their consumption. So consumption increases. Consumption is one of the components of aggregate demand. So as consumption goes up, aggregate demand goes up. Long run aggregate supply explain. Ooh, this one could go a couple different ways here. You have to explain your justification, but you could actually explain that a long run aggregate supply will stay the same simply because changing the income tax is going to change consumption. But there aren't really changes specifically for changes in capital expenditures, which will impact the LRAS. Or you could say that long-run aggregate supply will increase in the long run because long taxes will increase people's savings. They're taking, if they reduce your taxes by $60, I said, you'll spend 50, but save 10 of it. So people take that extra $10, put it in their savings accounts. So now real interest rates are lowered. That $10 goes into the bank. The bank lends that money out to businesses, and those businesses then go ahead and borrow it and use it to buy actual physical capital. And that physical capital enables economies to make more in the future. So making more in the future would increase your LRAS. Lastly, you could say that lowering your taxes will lead to a greater budget deficit, and those larger budget deficits then leads to your whole idea of crowding out with those higher interest rates because of that budget deficit, and the crowding out would actually have higher interest rates, which would lead to a decrease in I sub G. AP exam is going to give you a point for any one of these, but you had to explain why. You couldn't just say up, down, or remains the same. You had to give your justification, and you had to explain it. Moving on. Looks like we got a comparative advantage question here. So we got country X and Y with furnaces and solar panels. Okay, which country has an absolute advantage in producing solar panels? Remember, absolute is just whoever can make more. So for solar panels, who can make more? 12 is greater than 8, so we're going with country Y. They have the ability to make more. Calculate the opportunity cost of a furnace in country Y. Okay, so opportunity cost is just how much you have to give up. So in order to get one furnace, a furnace, you're going to have to give up 2 solar panels. The reason for this is just nothing more than a ratio. 6 to 12 is nothing more than a 1 to 2 ratio. So it's just reducing it down. So the opportunity cost of a furnace, 2 solar panels. Which country has the comparative advantage in producing furnaces? Explain. So remember, you have some options here for comparative advantage. You can always do that cross multiplication if that's easy for you. You know, you can multiply these two together, the 6 and the 12 to get some sort of number, and then the 6 and the 8 across to get a number, and realize that these two numbers, that cross multiplication, the 6 furnaces for country X and then the 12 solar panels for country Y, get you that greater amount, and that is just your comparative advantages. Or you could look at it and say opportunity cost of country Y for a furnace is 2 solar panels, but country X for one furnace is something less than 2 solar panels. Either way, you're basically determining that country X should make the furnaces and country Y should make these solar panels. So which country has comparative advantage in producing furnaces? Country X. Why? Because they have a lower opportunity cost at producing the furnaces than country Y. You know, they have to go up less than 2 solar panels in country X. Part D, if the terms of trade were that 2 furnaces are exchanged for 1 solar panel, so 2 furnaces exchanged for 1 solar panel, should country X produce solar panels domestically or import solar panels from country Y? So country X is making the furnace. Right now they're trying to say that 2 furnaces are exchanged for 1 solar panel. Well, if they had to exchange 2 furnaces for 1 solar panel, if they give up all 6 furnaces, that means they could only get 3 solar panels. Well, that is no good for them. On their own, they can make 8 solar panels. So no way, they shouldn't trade. They should produce those things domestically. So sorry, I haven't been looking at the scoring guideline here for you. Produce the solar panels domestically. We just stated over here the lower opportunity cost. We indicated that country Y had the opportunity cost of 2 solar panels, and that country Y had the absolute advantage of producing solar panels. Sorry, you guys can read that on your own. Lastly, number 3, exchange rates and interest rates are important for macroeconomic decision making. Yes, they are. Good statement. How does an increase in Japan's government budget deficit affect each of the following? The real interest rates in the short run in Japan explain. Okay, so they're talking about crowding out here. An increase in budget deficits, if this is straight from the flow chart, on the left side, if you take a look, as budget deficits go up, the government's going to have to demand more money or demand more loanable funds. And as you demand more money or demand more loanable funds, interest rates will increase. As they increase and interest rates go up, private domestic investment, or your I sub G, is going to go back down. It's more expensive to borrow the money, so I sub G goes down, and this is that crowding out process. Let's take a look at what they say here. One point is earned for saying that real interest rates in Japan will increase in the short run because the supply of loanable funds will decrease or the demand for loanable funds increase. I usually go off of this one here. The demand for loanable funds will increase. If you just remember that whenever there's an increase in spending, demand goes up. If you can just simply remember, demand is spending. So when the government spending goes up, demand goes up. Demand of money goes up. Demand of loanable funds goes up. Aggregate demand goes up. It's just real easy to help you out and remember that. So yeah, demand of loanable funds goes up, so that means interest rates go up. 1 point is earned for saying that I sub G, your private domestic investment, will decrease. Why? Because it's more expensive to borrow the money because of those higher interest rates. All right, draw a correctable graph, the foreign exchange market for the euro, okay, showing it for the euro, and show the effect of the change in real interest rates in Japan on each of the following. The supply of euros, explain yen price of euros. Okay, so interest rates, we just stated that interest rates in Japan are going up. So if interest rates go up, what are foreigners going to want to do? They're going to want to seek that higher rate of return. They want to seek that higher rate of return. So this is in terms of euros. So let's pretend that in Japan, interest rates are at 7%, but in Europe, they're only at 4%. What are the Europeans going to want to do? They're going to want to seek that higher rate of return out there. All right, so what's going to happen to the supply of euros? Well, the Europeans are going to want to buy the Japanese bonds. They're going to want to get the higher interest rate. They're going to want to get that at 7%. So in order to buy those Japanese bonds, they're going to have to supply their euros. They have to supply their own euros. They have to supply their euros so that they can buy the Japanese bond and get the higher interest rate. So they supply their euros, and this is going to cause the value of the euro to depreciate. And in comparison, the value of the yen will appreciate. To reverse the change in the yen price of the euro identified in Part B, so remember in this case, the euro depreciated, the yen appreciated. Should the European Central Bank buy or sell euros in the foreign exchange market? So the euros had flooded the market. There were too many of them. So we're going to want to see here to increase the value of the euro to bring it back up. The European Central Bank should buy them. They should get the supply lower, reduce the supply, buy them all up so that the euros are more rare and it appreciates the value of the euro back up. All right, that's all 3 questions here for the 2015 AP FRQ. Hopefully that helped. Thanks, guys. Bye.